This is Hades. We're on Xbox Series X taking a look at this really interesting and rather gorgeous roguelike experience. So the gist of it is, well, we've got Hades here and you're playing as, Hades is the god, son of the god. You're the prince of the underworld, basically. So, Hades, god of the dead, you, prince of the underworld. You can pet your dog. And yeah, like I mentioned, it's a roguelike where you're basically going in, dying, starting from scratch, getting some slight bonuses, and then going in again. So what are we getting here? Optimized 4K resolution, 60 FPS. It is an Xbox Play Anywhere title. So buy it once digitally on the Windows Store, Microsoft Store, or Xbox. Own it on both spots, so that's kind of cool. So yeah, when you go in and you play, you basically have this cool hangout spot, and then you're able to progress some of your skills each time you play. So there's different abilities that you get. So I have these purple crystals, and what they're doing is basically allowing me to improve various parts of my stats. There's also keys that can unlock new things, and there's also gems that could improve, well, basically your experience in other ways in regards to some of the stuff you could fix up. And then there's extra challenges there, and there's just a lot of ways to kind of improve your character, but we're going to talk about how that system works in a bit as well. So this is the engineering type area, so you can do some like cool customization elements, but you can also get some things that might benefit you when you actually get into the world. There's lots of different things I've built and lots of different things I've added to basically my selection of assets that assist me when I'm going into battle to try to survive, the nightmare and the problem in the different runs. So I've played quite a few numbers of this, like hours of this one, and it's pretty challenging. It honestly is. Like, it's not a hard game. I stand by that element. It's not a hard experience, but it's one that does actually scale as you improve. So it just continues to be really hard and sort of grindy is the biggest thing here. And it can get a little frustrating having to deal with that sort of thing as you attempt to try to survive and try to make it through the game and actually beat it, which is quite intense. And then there's like settings. There's a god mode, so you can try that one. Instantly makes you tougher. This is just to make the game so it's a little bit less intensive so you can actually enjoy the story. I thought that was worth mentioning just in case people were kind of curious or having a hard time with it. So being rogue-like, you basically just keep going through this area. There are a variety of different environments and rooms. I will say the game is aesthetically quite gorgeous, visually very impressive in so many different ways, from the particle effects to the enemies to the environmental aspects to how you move through the world and the little pop-up things of the story elements that come in occasionally. It's a neat story because you're basically, you want to leave the underworld, and then the other gods of Olympus are trying to give you a hand in order to do so. It's kind of neat. And then you get these choices. You go through the different rooms for what you're trying to fight for. I need more, power-ups, so I'm going to be fighting this way, and I get these blessings from the gods. Or I might need more health, and stuff like that. And there's like bosses you have to fight at different levels, and they mix things up. Like the boss you fight one time might not be the boss you fight the next time, to a degree. And you get the blessings here, and there's like a nectar system, and then they can give you these trinkets that improve you a little bit further, which are kind of neat. And you're basically just getting these different abilities. And you see I have a bow here, but there's different types of weapons. You don't necessarily have to have a bow. I just find this to be one of the easier weapons. There's things such as like a spear, or you got your initial sword, and you get to pick whatever playstyle kind of fits you, and you customize your experience. And every run, again, is different. You get different abilities, you get different elements that can help you fight back. It's really quite neat. And like I said, it's gorgeous. It really, really is. Like, the art style for this game is just absolutely phenomenal. I'm quite blown away by it, very thrilled, and generally just very happy with the look of the game. It seems to also perform quite well. It feels very fluid and smooth, which is fantastic, keeping in mind I'm on VRR for my screen. But yeah, I haven't noticed any sort of like performance issues. It just seems to very smoothly present a lovely and intense world that, again, not necessarily hard, but grindy. And it does get a little bit tiring. Like, I'm not huge on roguelikes. Some of them hit the mark quite well for me, and others you kind of just get a little bit tired of it. And I think this is one of those ones where I kind of got a little bit tired of it, especially at the point where it's like I've spent the time kind of mastering, you know, some of the bosses and the situations I have to do in order to survive, and then all of a sudden, you know, I buy an extra upgrade to make it a little bit easier for me, and all of a sudden the, you know, the boss scenario is different, or it's more difficult to be able to move through it, and I'm just like, well, this isn't really fair. And that kind of frustrates me a little bit. Like, for those that want that grind, that want that extra gameplay time, you're going to obviously love to have that here. I mean, you can play this over and over and over again. You'll sit there, you'll be like, one more turn. And I think most people will sit here and just, like, almost endlessly want to play this game, if that makes sense. Like, it can be quite addicting. I can definitely say that. At the same time, there's a point where I just kind of get, like, frustrated of doing the same thing repetitively. And I just get tired of it. I mean, you know, it's cool mastering the techniques of the game, the different meta elements of it. I find that kind of fascinating. Sitting here trying to figure stuff out, it's kind of cool. You know, like I said, different enemies, different setups each time you go through it, you know, they keep it fresh. And you do see some repeat in rooms as you go through them. I mean, once you play something long enough, of course you're going to. But it does feel quite almost infinite, just in regards to the variety of the different things you go to, the different rooms. It feels distinct each time. And I haven't gotten to a point where with some roguelikes, I'd be like, oh, I've done all this, I've done all of that, I know these rooms, I know them too well. This one, it still feels fresh each time I go through it. And I find that to be rather fascinating, because not many games can actually pull that off. And like, just look at the smaller details within the environment. And it's a responsive environment too, as you like damage things, break crates. And as you go to each area, I'm assuming most people have done roguelike type scenarios in the past. As you beat the first boss or whatever, you go to like a different environmental area, and then you go to another one. Some of them might allow you to like kind of continue from certain points. This one, you know, obviously doesn't. You gotta start from scratch. That's just kind of how it works. There you go. But then you get these different things. And it tries to assist you, but it's just kind of like, you know, it could be pretty rough. It can definitely be like, oh, geez, I'm just done with this. And, you know, other times it's like, okay, I want to keep going. And that's kind of the cool part of it, I think, is that for different people, you're going to find, you know, different types of value out of this one. I think it actually is a really, really great game. It is a phenomenal title. It's very well done. It's one of the more impressive roguelikes that I've ever played. At the same time, I think a lot of people maybe built this up to be a bit too much of expectation-wise, where I'm thinking it might be a little bit overrated in my opinion, but I still think, like, you know, art direction-wise, gameplay-wise, it's near perfect. It really is. They've done some fantastic stuff with it. And it's just like a question of if this is your type of game, because it feels like grindy. For me, I'm kind of like, okay, I've got my fill of this, I had fun with it, but I'm like, this is just too much. Unless I sit there, I guess, on the god mode and try to grind out the last little bit of it. But you know what I mean, like, I've gotten my thrill of it. Whereas others are probably going to be sitting there going like, oh my god, I just can't get enough of this. And the game's going to feel, you know, basically limitless to you, which is, you know, kind of exciting for those that, you know, want that sort of thing. I think that's really quite cool that this option is present there for you. And it offers just a lot of value in the package, because you can tell that it's so well polished. And I also wanted to talk about, and I don't know how well that's coming through in these parts, the game has incredible music too. The audio and stuff, and you mostly hear it kick up during like boss battles and stuff. But the music in this actually is just absolutely fantastic. Just the ambience and the atmosphere of this game really comes together in some very satisfying ways. And it feels sleek and it feels smooth. They really did like just a really good job with this. I want kind of more like this sort of like aesthetic in that. I'd really like to play more games like this, because it's so intriguing. I don't know what else to say. It's just kind of like a very fun, fast-paced, action-packed experience, and it, you know, tells you a bit about the story. It throws you in there, you understand things, and at the same time, you're kind of like, the story's a background thing. It's not that important, really, in regards to what you're doing, right? Because it's kind of like really kind of taking a seat. Well, you know, you got some characters between runs, you can sit there and you can hear the characters talk, and you know, there's different things here. I was kind of hoping we would get a different one of this lady, because usually they mixed it up recently. There's like a bunch of different sisters, but and that's where I was talking about where the scaling comes in. It's like, oh, I know how to beat this first one really easily, as long as she doesn't do like a purple attack thing, but you know what I mean? And then you get like different ones. Oh, the music's picking up too, which is awesome, and it just kind of like screws up your run. And sometimes you get like a perfect run build, and then you die, and you're just like, oh, because it's almost like you go back to having nothing. Like right now, where I've got like this sort of like streak attack like this, it's just kind of, it feels like I've got nothing compared to where I was, you know, in an earlier run where I had all these great abilities. It just feels like I've like basically gone back to just being like a straight up noob almost playing this game, which can be a little bit, you know, disheartening mostly, and just like really morale killing, I guess, is the biggest thing, because that can get just frustrating. That the purple stuff just absolutely drives me nuts. I can't really like evade it too well. But yeah, you get these different abilities, and you can just get this setup going where you're like, oh, I love what I've got, and then you lose it, and you're just like, oh, what do I do, right? Like, I want to be able to do what I was doing, and it just kind of sucks in that way. It would have been cool if the game did offer, to some degree, the option to be like, hey, I want to start off at phase 3 or phase 2. Because starting from the beginning each time is also something that I feel is quite fatiguing. It's like it's really easy. Like this stuff here, like I do not have any sort of challenge with it in the slightest. Except for her, she can be a little bit annoying. But you get what I'm saying, where I'm kind of like not really feeling the threat of things, and then it scales up slowly, and you're like, ugh. But it just kind of becomes something that is a bit exhausting to play. It holds it back from, for me, really becoming perfect, just having those extra like little accessibility options. So we're in the new area here. If you really think about it, the game itself actually isn't that long if you do like a perfect run of it, but it takes time to get to that perfect run, and that's why I'm saying it's kind of grindy in that regard. Is, you know, not only is it something where you have to actually work hard over and over to get it, it's even when you are working hard, the game is still scaling and kind of going against you at times, and that just becomes like a real, for me, a pain. I don't like that type of thing. But if you like it, that's cool for you, right? Like roguelikes in general, I think for some people really aren't quite worth it. But I will say this one is actually worth taking a look at, because it does roguelite in a really good way. You know, you do feel a sense of progression at the same time when they do make those adjustments occasionally, because, you know, it's a different run every time, right? Like this is completely different enemy setups, different, you know, kind of things. But when it scales like that, it's just kind of like, you know, a little bit frustrating to deal with, and I sit here and I go, oh. And I can see other people just going like, oh, this is just so defeating, to the point that I don't want to, you know, kind of keep dealing with this. Ooh, attack speed faster. Oh. Just want for you, your specials faster. That actually would be helpful. But yeah, I can just try to get the different perspectives of people playing this game and looking at it, right? Being like, do I like this element of it? Oh, I kind of don't like this, and kind of seeing where, hey, you might find this to be, you know, extremely frustrating and kind of something that throws you away from the experience. And they're also a little bit different because, you know, since it's random, you're not going to play the same game I'm going to play. You know, your runs will not be the same. Your 20 run-throughs of the game over and over again are going to be entirely different than my 20 run-throughs of the game, and you're going to pick different weapons, and you're going to have, you know, different things going on, and it's going to be an entirely unique experience for you. And I think that aspect of it's cool, but it's also hard to kind of give you a direct showcase of what I'm experiencing and talking about, because you probably won't experience the same thing when you go to play it. It could be more frustrating or easier, or you could have an entirely different experience than I do, and I think that's kind of neat, which is a good thing, and maybe also a bad thing from a review perspective, where I'm kind of trying to show off an experience to you, because, you know, it won't necessarily be the same. I mean, aesthetically it'll be the same, and movement-wise and stuff, but it's just like what abilities you get and how easy it'll be is going to be completely different, especially when you start out and you have to figure things out. I do actually suggest, you know, possibly like looking up videos. Like, I do have a, you know, we did a stream for this one, which actually might be helpful to kind of get an idea of some of the strategies, and it'll actually save you a lot of time having to sit there and figure out how to do a lot of the stuff. I know that sounds weird, but it is one of those games where you're not really going to get spoiled by watching stuff, but you're more or less actually going to be benefiting by the fact that you're going to have gotten some strategies for him, and it just saves you some runs and stuff like that as you go through it. Like, I don't think I'm necessarily bad at this game, but it's just kind of like a bit fatiguing and tiring having to try to work through these runs where you're like, ugh, we're not going to make the end of it. Like, you can kind of tell when you go through the runs where you're like, I'm not going to make this, and just expect to lose the first few times. You're very unlikely going to beat this on your first try. It's just hard to do, right? Because you don't have the abilities, you don't have the gems, you don't have the upgrades, you don't have the improvements. I mean, theoretically, eventually you should get to a point where you're so capped out, even if you've died a billion times, you should eventually just win it based on the fact that your character is like incredibly overpowered for every scenario. That's kind of the end game, but at the same time, with that scaling that I've mentioned, it can also be like, you know, kind of a little bit harder to actually achieve that, which is a bit of an annoyance. I would say the cast inflicts damage, reduced damage from foes. Death Blast, sure, why not? And I like to mix it up too. Sometimes you get like different scenario setups. I actually would rather buy some health from the store if I can get lucky. That would be helpful for this particular run. And I also like the characters too. There's like a bit of a style to them. Of course there's no actual food here. Oh, damn it. You know, there's like a cool style to the different characters, and again, the art design and how everybody interacts with one another. It's just really quite cool seeing them kind of be like, hey, because I'm assuming there's some kind of extra, you know, behind the scenes kind of a thing going on. You know, why they want this Underworld guy here. I'm trying to give you like, you know, spoiler-free sort of presentation thing, right? Because you'll probably come in here and you'll want to figure things out for yourself and all that. But, you know, there's actually like a bit of a story behind this one too, which you might find interesting and intriguing. I definitely did like it quite a bit. Even though it is, again, a very subtle sort of story setup. You're not necessarily perfectly engaged in what's going on. It's just kind of happening in the background while you're doing these fights. I mean, combat first, story kind of a secondary thing, and it's neat seeing Hades kind of like interact with all of the elements of you kind of being this prince that's just sort of leaving. And it's like, oh, you won't leave, and blah blah blah. And that's kind of a neat setup, because everyone's kind of been set after you almost, if that makes sense. Like, all the characters you fight boss-wise are here to kind of prevent you from leaving the Underworld, because they don't want you to, well, he doesn't want you to leave. And I think that aspect of it's neat. Really, I got a death to fight on that. Wow, I'm actually doing horrible, because this should be a very easy scenario for me to do where I actually don't get the death to fight. That's a little embarrassing, needless to say. Good thing I actually have a couple of those, but at the same time, it's like, wow, I can't believe I actually failed to do that, and then we're going to be going to... No, we still have to do like a boss fight area on top of this. Little surprising power-up. Oh, I should have gotten the food. Uh-oh. It's gonna be a little hard when you gotta fight the Hydra kind of coming up here. It's kind of neat. Yeah, this is gonna be a little bit harder to do, because one Hydra, you look different. And that's where I'm saying is like some of the scaling for the things kind of come in. It's a little bit more hardcore, and it's like, really, what can you do? And you just gotta deal with it. And it's just, yeah, it could be a little exhausting in that regard. That's what I'm saying, is kind of like, oh, I get used to fighting this thing. I try to get perfected at it, and it's like, oh, nope, things are a little bit different now. And there's not much you can do about it except for fight. And hope to survive. And hope not to die too badly and embarrass yourself if you are doing this. I mean, in front of others, probably most likely not. There's that extra pressure as well when you're going through it and you're trying to do gameplay. And a general review. But yeah, this game is definitely like worth checking out. It's very, very distinct. If you like roguelikes, you're going to be like, whoa, this is really top of the genre. And I think even people that maybe don't love the genre might find this game to be a little bit intriguing and neat, because it is a very well-polished package. It actually is a very well-done game. It's exciting, it's fun, it's exhilarating, filled with challenge and grind to play over and over again. And that's probably going to either be a bonus for you or something you don't like, the fact that you have to sit there and work over and over again. But that's what I'm trying to explain, is mostly, hey, you know, you get these choices, you get these scenarios where it's like, you know, this is what you're doing, this is the setup behind it. You're either going to love it or you're not going to be entirely into it, and that's perfectly fine and up to you, and I hope you kind of enjoyed this look at Hades on the Series X, because it's a neat game to kind of have available on the platform finally. It's a nice option, and it's definitely a distinct offering, as I had mentioned prior.